There we go. And then I'll share my screen. All right, can everybody see that?
Yes.
Good. So we're going to be talking about shifting paradigms and building timelines going into our first session today. So this will be a little bit of review for those of you who are with me for calling discovery. A little bit of review here, but it's good. The definition of calling is a God-given commission to embody a unique facet of Christ to others through a role or task. So a God-given commission to embody a unique facet of Christ to others through a role or task. So I'll break that down real quick. It's God-given. It comes by revelation, right? So this isn't just something we make up. It's something that God speaks to us in one way or another, whether it's that still small voice or circumstances or people, probably all three, and other ways as well. And that calling discovery, there's 12 different ways that God speaks to us about our calling. It's God-given. It's a commission. It's a unique assignment. We're commissioned to do it. Paul says, I'm compelled to preach the gospel. There's something that is driving us. It's, it's Holy Spirit driving us for this assignment, right? To embody. It's an incarnation. I lean in. It's an incarnation of an aspect of Christ, right? But you're expressing it in everything you do. It's a being call, not just a doing call. It's a facet of Jesus. It's the Christ implanted in you through your story. We often say, and I'll repeat this, but we often say who Jesus is to you is who he will be through you. So who he is in your story, you're going to be able to share that facet of Christ with others through a role. So the role for me is coaching. It might be something different for you, or it might be coaching, but it's through a role. The task is a channel. The role is a channel. It's not the goal, right? It's just a channel to get that facet of Christ, that incarnation through you to others. So any questions on any of that? The definition of call?
So the incarnation, is that, that's Christ formed in us, is that?
You were breaking up a little bit there. Did you say Christ formed in us?
Yeah, that's what I said. Yeah. Is
that's
that
right?
Okay.
That's exactly right. Yeah, and it'll be a specific. So, for example, my passion is to empower other people. That's why coaching is such a good role for me to express this facet of Christ. But as Jesus expresses himself through me, that's probably most often the characteristic people are going to pick up on, the characteristic of Christ being incarnated through me. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So we're going to go through some examples here. Which of these statements fits the definition of call? Okay, so think about that. Here, I'm going to share this one more time. Think about this definition of calling. Okay, a God-given commission to embody a unique facet of Christ to others through a role or task. And now, which of these statements fits that definition of call? So this is where we need some interactivity here. Take a drink of coffee.
Is there a place in the book that any of this is at right now? If not, that's fine.
I don't think it has these examples, but it does have that definition of the call, yes.
Yeah.
Of calling.
You don't happen to know where that is? offhand.
I don't know.
Okay.
I would have to take a look.
Oh.
Yeah.
No problem.
Okay. So does this fit this definition of calling? I am passionate about expressing my God-given gift for art and exploring my creativity. And feel free to share. As I said yesterday, I can't see everybody at the same time. So
I say no.
okay. And why is that, Lynn?
It's more about like natural talents.
Good. Yeah. It's more about natural talent, and it's about them, right?
Yeah,
What
it's
they
about
want to
them.
do. It's not God-given. It's not a commission. It's just about their passion or whatever. Yeah, good. Okay, how about this one? I looked at what I was gifted at and what my education prepared me for, and decided I want to be an architect and construct buildings that bring glory to God.
Yeah, it's about their own making again.
Yes.
And in some respect, when I'm looking at that statement, I would say it limits God, because often God will bring us into some situations where we really don't have what it takes.
Mm,
And you only jump by faith and hope that you keep your eyes on him, because you often feel somewhat inadequate until he jumps in and gives you what you need, basically.
right. Yeah. Agreed. It's good. Okay, now here's a tricky one, which I'm kind of giving it away, but I am called to preach the gospel on the mission field.
Doesn't seem to embody anything.
Okay, good.
Maybe it's not specific enough.
Yeah, that's a big part of that. Like, where is the Jesus in your story? What's unique about this? What's specific about it? Where is Jesus, as he's been rooted in your story? And this statement is about a task. It's not about an incarnation. So the most important part of calling is the being call. That's where that's the paradigm shift, right? Calling is something that comes through what I do, but it's not about what I do. It's about who I am. So calling is being. My call is something I am that comes out in what I do. And for most of us, that's a huge paradigm shift. We think that calling is all about what we do. But the heart of call is something you are. It's who God is forming you to be. That's the incarnational piece of this. Your mission, task, or role is simply the channel or the vehicle for that heart being call. So in other words, no matter what I do, so coaching is an ideal vehicle for me, or an ideal channel for me to express the facet of Christ that I incarnate. At least it's the best one that I've found thus far. But it wouldn't matter what I was doing. I could go do whatever, be a car salesman, or I don't know, fill in the blank, right? And I would still be doing that kind of thing because it's who I am, right? I could be in prison, I would still be doing that. I could be in Africa, I could be in Ohio, I could be in Norway. So it doesn't matter where I am, what I'm doing, my situation, what job I'm involved in, I'm still going to be who I am. I'm still going to be expressing that facet of Christ.
Jason, just a comment.
Sure.
Would you agree that unless you have developed that level of relationship through the hosting, you're never going to be at a place where you can say what you just said, actually. You got to have that tight relationship, knowing that you're hosting his presence, because otherwise you'll run into some situations and you'll rely more on being you rely more on the human doing as opposed to the human being.
Right. And yes, I agree, Claude. And I think that speaks to what we said yesterday, that it takes a lifetime for us to become the person God has created us to be, right? It's a lifetime of development. We're born with those gifts and talents. It takes a lifetime for us to develop the character and become, who God's called us to be. So there's a difference between doing and being calls. And we want to make sure we have that. Oh, sorry, Lynn. Yeah, go ahead. Oh, you're on mute. I need my coffee mug. You're on mute.
Will you say again what facet of God you embody? You personally?
So empowering others is a big piece. So championing others, empowering others. Jesus, you think about when he sent the disciples out 2 by 2, he was always training them and empowering them because he knew, hey, I'm not always going to be with you. You're going to have to rely on my Holy Spirit. So he's constantly empowering them to do the ministry, right? And to be who they've been called to be, asking those open-ended questions and, confirming to Peter who he was multiple times, that kind of thing. So when I coach people, often the impact that they come away with is confidence in themselves and who they're called to be, and renewed confidence and intimacy with Jesus. So that's what I'm most often expressing.
All right. I feel like that's where I get hung up a lot, like trying to pinpoint that for myself.
So we'll go through a little bit of that. And there's some of that in the Leader's Life Purpose Workbook, or the Calling Destiny. The Calling Discovery workshop that we do. But that takes a long time. Identifying those life messages is part of that. But it's a process. So, okay. So doing and being calls. Here's some examples, right? So David had a doing call and a being call. His doing call was to be prince over the people of Israel. So to be the king, right? His being call, which was far more important, and what we remember him for, is being a man after God's own heart, going to Jesus quickly, going to God quickly, and the painful things of life. And you read all through the Psalms, he's going quickly to God with his heart. At the time, that was radical, right? At the time, it was thought, you just make your sacrifice, slaughter your first lamb or spotless lamb, whatever, and you go on. But David was a man after God's own heart. He was the first one to show us what it really looks like to have that level of intimacy with God, where you're going with your whole heart, regardless of the situation, right? Like, he lost a child and he still went to God with all of his emotions, all of his heart. So David's role as a leader of, a small Middle Eastern kingdom 3,000 years ago, it was important then, right? But what was more important? Him being a king of a small Middle Eastern kingdom 3,000 years ago, or that he was a man after God's own heart? The answer is pretty obvious. I know you guys know the answer. So, but without his being call, he would have just been another obscure king, right? And had he not been king, we would not still have the Psalms. It was because he was king that we still have the Psalms today, to look and see what it looks like to go to God with our whole heart.
Hmm.
So Abraham had a doing call, go to the land, be the father of a nation. His being call was to become the father of faith. He's the first human to figure out that what God really wanted was belief in him and intimacy with him, not rule following or sacrifice. Which one of those is more important?
Father of faith.
Yeah, being the father of faith, right? And that righteousness comes through faith. That was
Mhm.
huge. It doesn't come through, sacrificing your livestock or whatever.
Hmm.
So, why is understanding calling and being terms powerful? Like, how does that free you?
Well, it seems like the doing is something that we can choose almost. It's something by our own human nature, how we put into action something we do. But calling is something that is going to bring Christ to the world and make a lasting and eternal impact.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, the doing is how we might get that out there so others can understand it, but it has
Right.
a bigger impact. It has a lasting impact that's focused on Christ, not on the human. The doing is like focusing on the person. The being is focusing on Christ, on God.
Yeah, there's definitely a little bit more, like we're looking at, with the doing piece, we're looking more about what are our passions, what are our gifts, what are our talents, what are, with the being call, this is who God is developing us to be.
I think
It doesn't mean that they're not all tied together. They are all tied together, but yeah. Go ahead, Claude.
I think the being is more sustainable
Yeah.
than the doing, because as you get transformed, as you get your character more and more aligned, and again, it's a process, it takes a lifetime, but as you go through that process, it's easier, for instance, to spend time in his presence than to be in front of an audience of 3,000.
That's right. Yeah, this doesn't depend on an opportunity to have an audience of 3,000,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You're going to be who you are, regardless of what audience or whatever that you're in front of. It doesn't depend on other people. It doesn't depend on a platform. It doesn't depend on an audience. It doesn't depend on a circumstance. This completely depends on you saying yes to what Jesus is doing in your life and in your heart. So there's freedom there, right? Again, like you could be in prison, you could be in Africa, you could be in Ohio, you could be, right? And it doesn't matter what circumstance or what job you're doing. This is who you are. And so that's always going to be expressed. For those of you who are familiar with maybe Bill Johnson or somebody like that. So if you're familiar with Bill Johnson, what's the thing you always walk away from, whether you hear him speak or if you meet him in person, or you always walk away I always feel like I have more faith after I've been around somebody like that. That's the piece of Jesus that he's incarnating. Doesn't matter what he's doing or where he is, or right? He's incarnating faith, the faith of Christ. That's just what he walks in, right? And you can probably think of somebody in your life that you know well. It's like, what do you walk away with every time you're with that person? Sometimes it's grace, yeah. So anyway, I could go on. Okay, so in regards to creating your timeline, we want to map your transitions to a standardized timeline first. Okay. So remember what a calling transition is. A calling transition is a point where your graph changes direction. Where it can go up. You're moving towards your call. Down, it feels like you're moving away from your call, or flat. A season on the timeline is at least 6 months long and usually much longer, right? So again, we're not talking about, you know, something that made you sad for 2 weeks or something like that. So we want to take your preliminary sketch and weed out the transitions that aren't major calling transitions and map it to the calling timeline. So remember yesterday, we're just kind of doing like a big brain dump, trying to get everything out there. Now we're going to whittle it down a little bit. So we need some tools to sort out the weeds. Yeah. So let me get an example here. This will be on page 42, I believe, as well. But here's an example of what this might look like. So the time between age 24 and 31, if you look, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but it's right here on 24, all the way to 31. So the general trajectory here is an upward slope, right? There's a very short period here about having a kid. He says the little booger doesn't sleep. And that guy, he interprets that as, man, this feels like, what am I doing? I'm just being a dad. I'm just, you know, I don't know how this is relating to my call, so to speak. But it's a very short period. So this generally upward slope, like this is just, in other words, this is not a big enough shift in his calling timeline to say this was a separate transition. This is just, so from 24 to 31, that's an upward movement. Okay, and so that's what we're trying to do. Like you may have marked something that was a very short period of time, but the general overall is an upward movement, right? Any questions on that? Does that make sense? We're just trying to weed out, you know, the things that maybe aren't as long or aren't as significant to your calling.
I guess I would,
Oh, go ahead.
I don't know, I think maybe these are very individual.
Yeah, yes, they
Yeah.
are.
That we have to look at, because having a kid that doesn't sleep, I don't know how that would affect my calling, but I don't know if this is a man or a woman that's on this timeline. So yeah, well, obviously it's a guy. So he married Chrissy, who had the baby. So yeah, the not sleeping is going to be maybe part of the calling for a guy.
Right.
I mean, it's like, yeah, what do you think?
Could be.
Yeah.
Well, and if that lasted for, let's say, 5 years, oh my goodness, you know, can you imagine? And often, I think this is especially true for women. Not that it can't be the case for men too, but just because, you know, stereotypical roles, you know, when women have kids, they feel sidelined. And so they feel like they're in this, either this flat spot, because they're so involved with their kids. It's like, well, what am I doing towards my calling? And so it either feels like this flat spot, or like I feel like I'm moving away from my calling, because of course I want to take care of my kids and, you know, all of that, but that leaves me zero time to be pursuing you know, this calling that God has on my life. But often what we find out is that God is using that time as a preparation stage. Everything you're doing with your kids, he's going to be using later on down the line. Again, this can work with men and women, but so that is often, you know, just to put that out there, that's a common experience for a lot of parents of young kids. So just to normalize that, hopefully for some of you. So, okay, stages. How long are stages? Stages are typically 3 to 10 years. And valleys are 1 to 5 years long. So the shortest stage is natural promotion. That's usually 3 to 10 years. The preparation, releasing, and fulfillment are usually a decade or even longer in length. So thankfully, the stages are usually longer than the valleys for most of us. Although for some, it is different. Okay, so you see here natural promotion, average length 8 years from natural promotion all the way to the valley of dependence. Preparation is usually around 10 years, all the way to the valley of wholeness, and releasing is average 13 years until the valley of identity, and then moving into fulfillment. So if you're 30 years old and you came to Christ when you were 18, what stages are you almost certainly not in? You're 30 years old, you came to Christ when you were 18. What stages are you almost certainly not in yet?
Like natural promotion would be one. You're past that, right?
You're probably past that, yep.
Okay. You're probably not in fulfillment yet.
And you're probably not in fulfillment, that's for sure. Yeah, you're probably not, you probably have not experienced the valley of identity yet, almost certainly. You almost certainly have not experienced fulfillment. I would say the only person who experienced that by the time they were 30 was Jesus. You're probably not even in your releasing stage yet. Right. So yeah, the temptation when we're younger is, one, we want to fast forward through all of this and be in fulfillment by the time we're 30. We want to go through all of the stages. You know, by our mid-20s, we want to have gone through all of the stages, right? I want to be in my fulfillment. I know I have a call. I'm supposed to be living it like the next day, right? Like, anyway. So the average time from lordship to fulfillment is 31 years after you make Jesus Lord, right? The average time from lordship to fulfillment is 31 years. So what does that tell you?
Tells me that I'm definitely outside the mean. Mine's more than 31 years.
Mhm.
Well, that's good insight.
Yeah, these things do vary. And
At least it feels like 31 years. Maybe some
Yeah.
aspects of it is.
no, I have a very good friend who he's almost 80. And he has had extended valleys in his life. That's just the way the Lord has worked with him. And he is just now at almost 80 years old. He's probably been in fulfillment for about 2 years. And I'm 48. And I've gone through this extended valley of identity, but I'm still early on the graph here. But it doesn't mean like I haven't done something right and that person did something wrong, or vice versa for that matter. It's just however God is dealing with us and how he's the only one who knows our days and knows, like what we need to, how we're going to impact people, when we're going to impact people, just all of those things. There's so many other things outside of ourselves that play into this.
Mhm.
We obviously are hopefully this isn't offensive, but we're still all egocentric, right? Like we want to see everything through our own lens, but there are so many factors outside of us that go into our calling journey. Okay, so we're going to work a little bit more on your timeline. So try to pick out the transitions on your graph that specifically relate to your calling, right? Again, this isn't just like a milestone graph or, just a lifetime journey, graph or whatever. Make sure they're related specifically to your calling. On pages 44 through 51 in your workbook, there are steps there. Work through those steps. And once you figured out where, and this is probably on a slide, sorry. There you go. Once you figured out where your stages and valleys are, fill in your details on one of the timelines, right? That's on page 50, 51. And if you have extra time, go to the chapter on your current stage. So if you figured out what stage you're in, like, oh, I'm in the Valley of Identity, or I'm in the preparation stage, whatever it is. And go to that chapter on your current stage and familiarize yourself with what God usually does with people in that current stage. Okay. And feel free, I'm going to be here. I'll be on mute and my video will be off, but I'm here. So if you want to put something in the chat or ask me a question or whatever, please feel free to do so. I'm going to give you guys about 20 minutes to do this. Okay. Any questions on that? Pages 44 through 51. I'll turn that real quick. Whoops.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Any questions? "20 minutes. I'll be right here if you need me." We have about 1 minute left for this exercise. I'm going to go ahead and tag a 5-minute break onto this. So when you're finished in about a minute here, we'll come back. Let's see, what time is it? So yeah, we'll come back about 1 or 2 after the hour. Okay. So go ahead and finish that and then take a 5-minute break. We'll be back at 1 or 2 after the hour. Hey, just a tip. While you're on your break, if anybody's still around and you can hear me, on page 49, there's a little blurb about why stage lengths differ. That's a good little bit of information there if you want to check it out over the break. All right, if everybody can start making your way back to your computer or tablet or whatever you're on, that would be great. And I'll just open it up. Any questions thus far from what we've covered thus far, or from that exercise or anything like that? If I start singing, do you think that'll bring people back or drive them away?
Let's give it a try.
Depends on the melody.
What should the melody be? I am a C, I am a CH, I am a CHRISTIAN. Okay, that's enough of that.
That was good.
All right. Any questions before moving forward? Did you feel like you were able to narrow down your transitions and stages and stuff a little bit?
Yeah, it's painful.
Good. Yeah, Consuelo. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm thinking I vacillate between some areas that were actually movement, life movement, like from one position to the next, to change of thinking areas
Mhm.
in there. I mean, is that what's supposed to be? Like things that happen, as you go through life, and then maybe a shift in your ideas. Do both of those go on the line?
They could. I think the question, something that might help is, did I become a different person through this?
Mhm.
So when you say different thinking, that might be speaking to, I became a different person through whatever that transition was. I
Mhm.
thought differently. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's what I was seeing. Something
Yeah.
was dramatic or such a shift that it changed my thinking process, which changed my direction, which changed my
Yes.
vulnerability to hear the Lord. Yeah, then I look at, just some of the things, trying to pick out situations that happened,
Mhm.
So yeah, okay. So
Yeah, and then the other thing you're asking is, you can have significant milestones in your life. They just might not relate directly to your calling.
mhm,
So did it relate directly to my calling? Like, I've moved and it had no bearing on my calling whatsoever.
mhm,
Moved states even. So that's a pretty big transition in my life,
yeah.
but it didn't have anything to do with my calling at the time. Now, I've also moved and it did have something to do with my call. There was a big transition there, right?
Mhm.
So anyway, that's
Hmm.
another question to be asking too.
Yeah. Okay. Well, just, I'm thinking like that because I had a big move. And at first, to me, it didn't have anything to do with it. But as I look back in this exercise, it actually did have an impact because it put me in another place to have to seek God differently. So
Right.
I wonder if it takes a little time maybe to go back and analyze what actually really did happen.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's amazing when you look back and you see, oh, God's hand was on this in this way.
Yeah.
I had no clue at the time. But for this specific, graph, this calling timeline,
Mm,
we're more looking at how it felt in the moment.
mm,
So without the benefit of hindsight.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay, that helps. Thank you.
Sure. Okay, so in this session, we're going to be exploring more specifically your timeline and different variations and things like that within the timeline. So we're going to look at them briefly as a group, and then I'm going to have you guys break out into breakout rooms and talk about them together. So the first section is natural promotion, right? So there's two patterns for natural promotion. The standard pattern is you make Jesus Lord, and then you go into this natural promotion stage, right? That's kind of your typical, most common. However, there are some people who will make the descent into the valley of dependence before they make Jesus Lord. I am one of those people. So usually this happens when people grow up in Christian homes. It often takes, because they've been taught this stuff their whole lives, it often takes a descent into the valley of dependence before they take Jesus on as their Lord personally. Like previously, it's kind of that whole thing where you're renting your parents' faith or your family's faith kind of deal. Jesus takes you on something specific to you, your own journey, into the valley of dependence, and then you make that decision for yourself. Now, I did not grow up in a Christian home, but I had this vague sense, this vague faith, if you want to call it that, in God. And I had to take a very steep descent before I was able to call Jesus my Lord and have a personal, authentic relationship with him. So that's one variation for natural promotion. So in other words, excuse me, if you don't have a valley within 5 years or so of lordship, the pattern of you've already probably gone into that valley of dependence, right? So who fits the standard pattern, and what makes you think that that's the case? The standard pattern where you made Jesus Lord, and then, within a couple of years, you went into that valley of dependence.
Yeah, that was I think that was my journey.
Okay.
Even though, it was a lot of negative circumstances that moved me to accept Christ in the first place. But as I did accept Christ and was learning and feeling what it was really like to be part of the body, a local body of Christ, and feel the love and so forth, and get opportunities to try things, different roles. That was like a natural promotion for me for about 5-6 years, I would say.
Okay, yeah. And as you got involved with the body of Christ, were you starting to discover, your passions, your gifts, your talents, and actually see, like, experience using those and that kind of thing?
Yeah, I think a bit, but then at some point I started running into the internal issues that I brought into adulthood.
Yeah.
It started coming up, affecting my marriage and affecting my quality of life, my heart, heart distress, different things. So that would be the other side of that, the other slope after natural promotion, which led me to look at, get some more Bible training, get a better perspective of the Bible. I started into a 12-step support group for adult children of alcoholic kids, or adults from alcoholic homes, and I started getting answers. So I don't know. I guess that seems to be the top one that you have, I think.
Yeah. It's good. Thank you, Jim. Someone else, does the descent before lordship relate to anybody else? And if so, what leads you to that conclusion?
I'm not sure if I'm understanding it properly, so let me see if I can process.
Yeah.
I think that lordship usually takes place as a result of coming to the end of ourselves. So we're willing to acknowledge Christ as Lord, not just acknowledge, but submit to his lordship. And you're suggesting it's an alternative pattern. So help me understand.
Well, no, not necessarily an alternative. Yeah, not necessarily alternative. If I can give an example from my own life. So, well, the example from my own life is I had a descent. I was in college. Okay, a little bit of background. Both my parents are professors. They're super intellectual. Education meant everything for them. And there was this huge thing of like performance. You had to perform in school. I never did really enjoy school. But so I wanted to just be accepted for who I was and that kind of thing. So I always had this kind of general, like I said, this vague faith, like I know God's out there, but I didn't have like this really personal relationship. But when I was in college, I kind of started having this major season of depression because of kind of that wound of wanting to be good enough or wanting, whatever. And that's what God used, that descent, that situation, that wounding, to bring me to that valley of dependence. But for other people, it doesn't necessarily require this huge descent first. I understand what you're saying. There is certainly a degree of you have to have some revelation that I need Jesus. Like I can't do this on my own, or I can't be righteous on my own. I realize I'm a sinner. Those kinds of things. But it's not necessarily this long, descent into a valley of dependence. It can just be a recognition of I'm a sinner who needs a savior and want to live my life for him. Or I have an experience with Jesus where, wow, Jesus he's good and he loves me and I want to be with him. So I think there's a distinction there. Does that make sense?
Interesting. I guess I was projecting my experience on everyone.
We often do that. Yeah. Okay. Any further questions on the variant here with natural promotion in the Valley of Dependence?
Now, to follow up on that, within a few years of lordship, I did have an experience where it was kind of like God said, are you, like something happened in my life and I was angry at God and I had a choice. It's like he said to me, so I said, you can't do that to me. And he said, oh, can't I? I mean, are you taking it back? So that was a surrender. That was a significant surrender, probably about 5 years after the acknowledgement of lordship.
Yeah, so that's either going to be, I'm guessing that's probably the Valley of Dependence, or was the Valley of Dependence for you. It's either going to be that or the Valley of Wholeness. I would guess it's probably the Valley of Dependence, though.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So the second stage is the preparation stage, and there's some variance with that as well. So there's inside preparation. So this is preparation that happens inside your area of call, and it's experienced as a productive time of service and growth. Okay. So I've had both. My inside preparation looked like I started, so 6 months after this was part of my natural promotion too, but it was because my descent happened first and then, but my descent into dependence happened first. And then the lordship, it all became one upward slope, right? So I started leading a college ministry. Then I was an associate pastor and a youth pastor. And then went to another church and was an associate / youth pastor in that church. Then I was in seminary. I did BSSM. So all of this preparation stuff inside my area of call, all of this was ministry. All of this was learning how to feed his sheep and feeding his sheep at the same time. I'm learning all of this stuff. I'm preparing. It's all inside preparation. That's one way of preparation, right? There's another variant here, and that's outside preparation. Outside preparation, it's preparing you outside of your area of call. Okay, so who am I thinking of? Well, I'll give my own personal example first. So when I was a counselor for a foster care agency and then got promoted to the treatment director of that foster care agency, I felt like, it's not that it wasn't great work and meaningful work, but it did not feel like it was in my area of calling. I felt like I was going away from my call. And that's what it feels like. For those of you who have had outside preparation, it may feel like a wilderness time for you. So Tony Stoltzfus, who wrote all this, he was a furniture designer for 15 years. God was preparing him through being a furniture designer to be a coach and to write all this curriculum and all of this stuff. But he was learning how to take, people didn't know how to verbalize exactly what they wanted. They could see a picture, but they didn't know how to. And he had to be able to take that and give them language around it. And I don't know how many of you're reading this and you're like, oh, this is, I'm getting language around what I've experienced or what I am experiencing. And then able to flesh out that picture for them. Those are huge skills for a coach. Joseph was being prepared in prison, right? Moses was being prepared in the desert. Those are outside preparation examples. So outside preparation often feels like a wilderness time. So that's one aspect of that. Often those in outside preparation will experience a day of release. So for me, I gave this example previously, but as I'm treatment director, and it's darkest before the dawn kind of thing. So with Joseph, it was the butler forgetting to tell the king, and it was like, I'm never going to get out of here. I'm never going to get out of prison and be able to fulfill my call. For me, it was, I guess maybe I'm not called to be a pastor. Maybe I'm not called to, minister in the church or whatever. Like I got a promotion. I guess I'm supposed to be here. And that was really discouraging for me. So it felt darkest before the dawn. Like, wow, I really thought I was called to this. Maybe not. I'm never going to get out of this. And it seemed like it happened in one day. It probably happened over a couple of weeks, but all of a sudden, I'm interviewing for a pastor position of a church, and it all works out, and I start pastoring a church. But I had outside preparation for that. So Joseph, again, was in prison. The next day, he was at Pharaoh's right hand. David goes from being a fugitive to being a king in a very short time. Barnabas goes and recruits Paul into leadership at Antioch. Being recruited is often common when you're in that outside preparation thing too. So who feels like your life fits the inside preparation variant here? And why do you think that? Yeah, go ahead, Claude.
Probably because if I look at my years in the computer industry, and there's many, like 48 years in the computer industry and a variety of business development and sales and marketing and worldwide role and what have you, you would think it has nothing to do with kingdom work. But one of the things I acquired, which probably had the most value, is I went through a stage where I was doing business development. And that work mostly meant bringing people together who are working on things that have a lot of potential for partnering or opportunities to do things symbiotically, but at first glance, it doesn't. They look like they're separate things. And the best example I can give you is what happened in the last 3-4 weeks when, even though I do have a full-time job here as a pastor in the church, I still had this bug in me of wanting to finish my 3rd-year internship with Bethel.
Yeah.
And I discovered that this couple, they're about give and take, I think they're a little younger than me, they're in their 60s, but they had been with me on year 1 and year 2 online. They finished both years online. And they showed up as a potential mentor for a specific ministry they had developed 18 years ago in Haiti, of all places. And they lived in Haiti, and they no longer do. They live in Seattle, but they still have that ministry. It's called New Generation Haiti. So I applied for the mentorship, and we're busy waiting for Bethel to give us the final blessing because I'm in Colorado, they're in Seattle. It's a little trickier. It involves, remote mentoring and what have you. But purely out of circumstances, I've got a friend who lives in the Bay Area who mentioned that he knew somebody who had a construction business in Haiti. And it's also under a ministry umbrella. It's also somewhat of a 501c3, but they basically take people with no skills in Haiti and they teach them how to become carpenter and plumber and electrician, what have you. Now, on the one hand, I've got this guy I'm going to mentor under from a classic type of ministry with orphanage and schools and medical clinics or what have you. And then on the other hand, I discovered this company who does building in Haiti. And the first thing that hit me, and I think it's because of that business development background I have, is wait. These guys have to talk. We have to bring them together. There's got to be something we can do from a potential partnering opportunity. That happened, by the way, in the last 24 hours.
That's
and
awesome.
Now there's conversations going along the line of, if I need to build one more orphanage, why would I partner with you since you have a construction, that kind of thing.
Right. Now, let me ask, okay, so Claude, are you giving an example of outside preparation or inside preparation?
Outside preparation.
Okay, that's what I thought. Because I had asked about an inside preparation example. I'm like, wait a minute, you're describing an outside preparation, but I wanted to make sure we were on the same page.
No, I'm sorry.
No, that is a great example. Yeah, that's a great example of outside preparation. And yes, all come together now, even in the last 24 hours. That's great. Yeah, no, that's a good example. Now, does somebody else feel like I fit the inside preparation example?
Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. I just wanted to make sure everybody was on the same page there. Yeah. Anybody else fit the inside preparation?
Jason, I have, as I look at my preparation period, I can see a few things that were outside preparation, but one thing that was inside preparation is that as I developed some competency in a 12-step program that I had chosen and got it made available to me. I became a facilitator, and I probably did that role as a facilitator for 9 years. So I did shepherding, I was trying to figure, this is back in the 90s, I was trying to figure out how to, reading books on how to get to the heart level stuff, but there wasn't a whole lot out there. There was a David Seaman's book and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it's like, I read it, I don't know, I need like a group I could be part of. I didn't know how to do that. So that was part of my inside preparation.
That's good. Yep. Excellent example. Good.
Yeah, I wonder if this would be something. When I was 14, I decided I was going to read the Bible because I was just feeling that there was confusion. My family had 2 different religions, and the parents and people were always fighting, but we're all supposed to be loving Christian people. So I decided to read the Bible. It took me a year, 14 to 15 years old, and I've been reading through the Bible almost every year. I mean, I did it again last year, and I'm reading parts now, but I'm thinking that was insight and preparation, because I didn't have another person or group or something that I really felt I was getting that from, and I wanted to get out of confusion of what do we really believe and why is this book so important? So would that be an example?
That's amazing. Well, okay. So had you already made Jesus Lord by that time?
Yeah.
So you made Jesus Lord very early on.
Yeah, it's 6 years old. I mean, as much as I could understand at that time. And it came from reading Bible passages in Sunday school, at that age. And, but I went to, I was taken to church. I had made my first communion in Catholic church. And then the next week I was taken to Sunday school in a Baptist church. So then I decided to make him my Lord and Savior. But I was about 14, 15. I thought, I have to figure out why this book is important and, what's really real and all that kind of thing. So I'm wondering if that would be an insight.
Sure. I think that's part of it for sure. That was an aspect of your preparation, I think, for sure. Yeah, that's really cool. Yep. I think I have some hopefully holy jealousy, right? Of being able to make a decision that early on. That's pretty cool. Pretty cool.
Well, there were valleys, but after.
I'm sure. Oh yeah, I'm sure.
But I created a foundation that way, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's really cool. Okay, so
Jason, real quick.
On
the example you gave from your life, the inside and outside preparation, were those consecutive or were they sequential with a valley in between, or what did that look like?
They were consecutive.
Okay.
Yeah, it all was one. So again, if I take a step back and don't separate things too much, that was all one upward line until all one. Yeah, I think upward line until the whole treatment director thing came around, and even a little bit the counseling, but definitely when the treatment director thing, that's when it was started feeling like, oh, I'm going away from my call. Yeah. Okay. So what happens if my life doesn't seem to fit the timeline? Okay, a couple options here. One, go back and make sure you've identified the transitions are really calling transitions. It's something to do with your calling. They related to your calling. Option two, excuse me, it doesn't have to fit. Again, this isn't a religion. Everybody's not going to fit perfectly on this graph, but learn what it has to teach you. Just see what it can teach you. Models are averages of many lives. No life is going to fit perfectly on this graph. And option 3 is it doesn't have to fit, your journey may be unique and it's God's call, right? It's God's call what your journey is going to look like. So this is on page 49. I'm actually going to just read this because I think it's that valuable. This is why stage lengths differ, page 49. If you made Jesus your Lord in childhood, your natural promotion stage may be a lot longer. If you got off course or backslid for a period of time, that stage you were in may be a bit longer. If you made Jesus Lord in your 30s or later, all your stages will tend to be shorter. It's common for younger leaders to overestimate their progress. And then the last one, of course, God may just choose to take you on a longer or shorter path. It's his call. Right? Our life is not our own. He knows what he's doing, right? Okay, so I'm gonna have you guys break out into groups here. I'm gonna have each person take 10 minutes to share about the way your life fits onto this timeline. So if you have questions about how your experience fits into this model, discuss that with each other. Ask each other questions. Speak into each other's lives. And then, have your peers ask questions that draw out the different characteristics in your early stages. For reference, page 184 has those different characteristics of the different stages. Okay, so if you look at page 184 in your book, way in the back, it has all the characteristics of each stage and valley. So you can go over that, and get a better idea. Okay, is this the stage I was in? Is this the valley I was in? Do these resonate with where I was then or where I am now? So let's put you in breakout rooms.
Hey, Jason, I was gonna just mention, I had an internet issue about 10 minutes ago and it kind of knocked me out and then I got back in. So I don't, hopefully it won't happen again, but just
No worries.
I might
Yeah.
I could get bumped out of the group and need to get put back in or something.
Right. No worries.
Jason, I don't know whether this is the appropriate time to ask this, but I don't understand the Valley of Identity. Will you be explaining that further in the future?
Yes. And I would, again, I don't know if you've read in the book yet, but Tony talks a lot about that in the book.
Okay.
He breaks down each stage in each valley in pretty good detail. And then as I said, on page 184, so let's see, Valley of Identity is probably on the 186. Yeah, that's on page 186. There's a lot of indicators there. So you might want to go over those and see if any of those resonate or whatever.
Okay.
But basically so for me, I didn't realize it. I mean, I always said, man, it's all about Jesus. And that was a soapbox issue for me. When I saw a ministry that wasn't all about Jesus, I was very sensitive to that. And it bothered me. So I would always say that. But what I realized when I went through my Valley of Identity is my identity was tied up in being a good dad, being a good leader, being a good pastor, whatever, several things, right? And so through this valley, he's had to detach my identity from all of those things so that my identity is only in Christ. And I'm able to say coming out of this valley, I'm able to say, Jesus is worth it all. If I never fulfill my destiny, even if I was never a good dad, now, of course, I want to be a good dad. I want to be a good leader. I want to, but my identity is not tied up in those things anymore. And it'll be different for everybody, right? Somebody, their identity is going to be tied up in their position or their income or who knows what. But that valley is detaching you from all of those things so that your identity is only in Christ.
Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you.
Yeah, hopefully that's helpful.
I
All
have
right,
a
I'm going to open
question,
up the room.
Jason.
Oh, yes.
So when we get into our groups, we're basically determining where we are presently, or what would you like us to do?
Yeah. So let's see. I mean, basically, you're going to be sharing with each other, like, how do my experiences fit into this? So here's how I think they fit in. Here's questions I might have about where I fit into this time or how my life fits into this timeline. Here's where I think I am now. And then just discuss it, ask each
Okay.
other questions about it.
Okay.
Tell me how this fits. And again, you can go to page 184 and okay, I think I'm in, the releasing stage. And here's what relates to me or resonates with me with those different characteristics that you see on page 184, 185, 186.
It's clear. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, you'll have 10 minutes each to share. Claude and Lynn, you'll be in a group of 2, so you guys will actually have 15 minutes each. So you guys can do a deep dive. All right, so 30 minutes altogether. Any questions before I send you off?
Nope.
All right.
That preparation time. But at that time, I took this level of ownership. I also didn't understand the boundaries of what God should own and what I should own in relationship to somebody else. I would over function.
Good. That's
Okay.
a perfect example. Yes. So you learned how to set a boundary of this is where I'm over functioning and this is where I need to let God do his thing. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, I would say I was coming face to face with the fact that I was over functioning. It wasn't until like more recently, say in the last 10 years, that I've learned how to not over function well, as like as a leadership coach, right?
Sure.
You're going to listen, you're going to reduce the amount of airtime that you have.
Yeah.
So, but I kept running into it. Like I'm over functioning. I don't know how to stop.
But okay, from what you're saying, it sounds like you first started running into that in your preparation stage.
Yeah.
And God was that's a very practical skill, right? Like there's a heart issue there too, probably, but it's a very practical skill to learn how to reel yourself in and allow God to do what he wants to do and allow others to be, to express what they're going through or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
Excuse me. Someone else, when you went through your preparation stage, what was most helpful that you learned to prepare you for your destiny?
Probably find my true identity.
Okay.
And
was there a practical skill there that you learned to help you do that?
I think probably one of the things that helped me the most is to recognize that who I was not so much the things I was accomplishing in terms of check marks, but more how much I was actually growing in my relationship with God. And to be totally fair, Bethel year 1 did that for me.
Yeah.
It did
Yeah.
that for me after I embarked this dark, dark valley of being unemployed.
Yeah. That honestly, Claude, that sounds like something that was formed in that valley. And maybe you saw it, come to fruition in the preparation stage. I don't know.
There is
But
no
that sounds like an inward formation thing.
There is no question. It did happen.
Yeah, yeah.
It did happen in the valley. I mean,
Right.
I sometimes think that you have to be at a place where there's nowhere else to go.
Right. Yeah, that's definitely a valley. So in the remember the preparation stage is more of a flat stage where it's kind of like life is happening
Yeah.
and I'm building skills and I may not even recognize it at the time, but God is actually using that season. So Moses is a good example, right? He's in the desert. He feels like, what's happening here? Or David in the cave even, well, that was a valley for David.
So
Trying to
in
think
the light of that, I think probably one of the best benefits during the preparation stage was effective listening.
Good. Yeah, there you go. That's a very practical skill that you had to learn.
Oh, absolutely.
And all of it, yeah, the business stuff and
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah, for Tony, like he was a furniture designer. Like it feels like, how does this have anything to do with my calling? But he's learning to put language around an idea, right?
Yeah.
Which really helped him as an author and as a coach later on. Okay. So for most of us, we don't see the connection at the time, right? So Tony's a furniture designer. He has doesn't feel like there's any connection there. But later on, we see how God uses that to help us fulfill our destiny. So is there anybody here with us today that you feel like that's where you are? You're in the preparation stage currently? Here's a question. How many of you feel like you're currently in a valley season? 1, 2, 3. Yeah. I'm so sorry. Don't worry. There's purpose behind this too, and it won't last forever. Yeah. So, okay. There's another exercise that can be helpful called the 5 fingers exercise. It's on page 94. If you want to look there real quick. But you're just, you're looking at the different competencies and character qualities with that exercise. So feel free to reference that later, but different competencies like networking, relational skills, certain type of job or life experiences, all those kinds of things can be helpful to figure out in your preparation stage of what he's using there, what he's developing there, practically speaking. So, give me a second. Yeah, if someone who has a fairly solid idea of what your calling is and what your destiny role is, can you maybe describe that for me? So I'm looking for a volunteer. You have a fairly good idea of what your destiny role is.
Jason, what do you introduced a new term, destiny role?
I use destiny and calling interchangeably. Yeah, so calling, yeah. An idea of what so like for me, my calling role or destiny role, I think, is to be a facilitator and trainer for heart coaching, right? Encounter coaching. Bringing transformation to individuals and cultures. So does someone else have and to be honest, that may not be a bullseye yet for me. But anyway, you have a pretty good idea. Yeah, Claude.
I'm called to disciple nations.
Okay. Called to disciple nations. What kind of practical skills do you need to be able to disciple nations?
Well, as if, for instance, the fact that I speak French fluently is going to help me with
Yeah,
my.
that's good.
It's
Good. Yeah.
going to help me in both certainly in Haiti, even though
Yeah.
Creole is still very, very important to have.
That's that's a great example. You're bilingual. That's perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's another practical skill you need?
Public speaking.
Yeah. Public speaking.
Yep.
Another one you already mentioned, I think, networking.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Good. So those are the kinds of things that the preparation stage is developing in us to be able to fulfill our calling, right? Okay. So if you were going to summarize the key to engaging God in preparation, how would you say that? The key to engaging God in the preparation stage. What would you say?
For me,
Go ahead, Eileen.
am I on? Okay. For me, it was worship because it can be really challenging in those places. And I don't know, I feel like something the Lord I feel like one of my, I don't want to call it a label, but like I feel like I'm a joy bringer and an overcomer. And a lot of that had to do with me worshiping my way through a lot of challenging times instead of running away from God, pressing into him more. Just so that even though things weren't the way I wanted them to be, I still had joy. I still had peace. I was still close to him.
Yes.
So.
And I would say that that's a key throughout this, throughout the entire timeline, right? That's a key. Like, we are, I want to say this. This is a little bit dangerous. And many church cultures or yeah, and I would say like specifically revival culture, we're taught to, this is not a bad thing. That's why this is why this is hard to say. And sorry, that's Jackson. If you were able to hear that. Oh goodness. We're taught to fight, to overcome, to declare, to all those things. A big part of the calling timeline is surrender, right? Like letting go, being content with where we are. So there are seasons for each, right? Of course, we want to kind of the idea of pulling heaven to earth and those kinds of things. But there's a part of us that sometimes we neglect in certain streams where we need to surrender. We need to be content with where we are. We need to engage God in our circumstances. But that worship thing, and that's part of that, right? Surrendering and saying, hey, you're God and I'm not. And I'm going to worship you as God and humble myself as I'm not God and be content with where you have me. But what's specific to the preparation stage? So I think that could apply to all of these, the entire timeline. But what is specific to the preparation stage? If you were going to, summarize the key to engaging God specifically in the preparation stage, what's God trying to do here?
I'm thinking about the waiting thing. A lot of internal stuff are not getting fixed yet that I know needs to get fixed, but I'm, wait on the Lord, be of good courage. He will strengthen your heart. Wait, I say, on the Lord. It seems like there's a lot of waiting and avoid disengaging with him.
That's good. I like that. Avoiding disengaging. Lynn, were you going to say something? I can't hear you for some reason, but you're not on mute. Can you guys hear Lynn?
No,
I can't.
No. No. Not sure what's going on, Lynn, but we can't hear you. Okay, try again. We still can't hear you. Okay, so I'm just gonna, we'll move forward. I think the key here to engaging God in the preparation stage is that you are learning every practical skill you can get your hands on to fulfill. And Lynn is nodding her head. I think that's what she was gonna say. Yeah, good job, Lynn. Yeah, we wanna learn all the, so like, you know, whether it was tending sheep in the fields or, you know, for us, it might be something else, of course, but you're learning all the practical skills. So engage in that. There might not be some huge heart renovation thing happening at this time. Or you may not be in this place where you feel like you're able to use all your gifts and talents, but you're learning some practical skills that you're going to need down the road to fulfill your call. Okay. All right. So let's go. Oh, we're not there yet. To engaging God in natural promotion. Okay. So what's God after in the natural promotion stage? So some of you have been through this stage. What did you do to lean into God in the natural promotions? So remember, natural promotion. You've made, you know, you've made Jesus Lord. You're discovering you have gifts and talents to offer. You're you know, maybe being used in ministry for the first time, or you're used in your calling somewhere for the first time. For Jesus, this looked like when he was 12 years old and he's in the temple and he's teaching all the scribes and Pharisees and they're all blown away. He's tasting what it's going to be like for him to operate in his calling, right? So what's God after in that natural promotion stage? What would it look like to lean into that?
Taking risks.
Good. Yeah, taking risks. Yep. Big steps of faith and risks. Yes, Eileen. Good.
I think humility.
Well, that's going to come in the valley. That's going to come in the valley of dependence. Yeah. Yeah, that's going to come hot on the heels.
It's easy not to
natural
include it in
promotion.
that stage, I tell you.
Yes. Yeah, that'll probably come after the natural promotion stage.
Yeah.
But yeah, in the natural promotion stage, he's looking for us to be radical, to take big steps, to prioritize our spiritual life over anything and everything else, right? To walk in faith, and really to set the direction for our life. Okay. So those of you who've been through this stage, what did you do here to lean into God? To lean into God's purposes here?
one thing that I did, I'm in the Detroit area, so I'm Detroit Tiger fan, right? Lived
Okay.
at that time, been up and down with them. And this is around 1984. I'm in that natural promotion stage. And they went to the World Series that year. I let it all go. I kind of knew what was going on, but I did not. I was, like you said, prioritizing spiritual life.
That's really good. Yep. Yep. It's really good. Good. Yeah. So how to engage in a valley? In a valley, so valleys are used to separate us from work and to separate us from, you know, kind of anything where we've gotten our heart entangled, or even our identity entangled with something other than Christ. So your productivity has been curtailed to make time for inward renovation. So how can you lean into that? Those of you who have been through a valley.
Just asking God, what do you want to teach me in this time? Who do you want to be for me in this time?
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, what are you putting your finger on in my heart in this time? Not worrying too much about finding another job, like if you've been released from a job or something like that. So often in a valley, we kick against the goads. We don't want to go there, especially like the valley of identity, because we've just tasted the releasing stage where we're experiencing all this success, and we want to go back to like, oh, I want that success. I want to feel like important, or I want to feel significant. I want to, well, whatever it is. And so we'll try to find another place where we can experience all of that. And God just seems to somehow get in the way and thwart us being able to do that, because he's jealous for our hearts. So this, in the valleys, I talked previously about letting go. It's so important that we let go in the valleys. And embrace who God is trying to develop us to be.
Jason, I'm wondering, in the valley, is this where we have to struggle with really pressing into God and not letting him go until he blesses us, or pressing into understanding that we need to do that and not try to do it on our own? So we have to learn in the valley that doing it on your own isn't going to get us back up the mountain. It's pressing into God.
Yeah, that's right. When we try to do it on our own, he'll just keep sending us back down the mountain. Right. The temptation is to want to fight, and like I said, like we're taught to do that in several different streams of Christianity. We're taught to just keep fighting, and when bad circumstances happen, we're just going to overcome, or we're going to declare our way out of it.
Mhm.
We're going to scripture our way out of it. We're going to worship our way out of it. And God is saying, actually, excuse me, I want you to embrace it. I'm actually doing something here. Yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah.
So those of you who have been through a valley, or maybe you're currently in a valley, what's it like for you? Like, what are you struggling with? What lies or obstacles are standing in the way, or did stand in the way? Maybe someone who hasn't shared as much.
Others' expectations.
Good. Say more about that. That's a really good one.
Well, I guess it's kind of tied to productivity too. So others' expectations
Right.
of my productivity.
Yes. Oh, that's excellent. I think that's a struggle for all of us. Yeah, you're supposed to be, well, so fill in that blank for you, if you don't mind, Aaron. You're supposed to be doing what? And what are you doing?
Well, I mean, yeah, I guess more simply for me, I'm supposed to be working in like a social work job, or, my career. I feel like I was really tied to my career. And so, but I recently, had to let that go and figure out how to be okay with not having a career at the moment.
Yep. yeah, there's a huge pressure, especially I think in Western culture, huge pressure to have a career, and especially for women, like you're supposed to do it all, right? You're supposed to be a mom. You're supposed to have a career. You're supposed to do everything. Those expectations are ridiculous. But yeah, you might feel that pressure when you choose to embrace what God is doing and follow God. First of all, one of the greatest indicators that you're actually following God into your call is that nobody else understands. If everybody understands what you're doing, you might be off track a little bit. Anyway, that's a freebie there. But yeah, so expectations of others I think that's a great example. So thanks, Aaron, for sharing that. So Eileen posted in the chat, how do you know when to surrender in the valley or when to use your authority when obstacles arise in relation to your calling? Excuse me. I mean, the first thing I would be doing is asking Jesus. It's, we often don't think to do that, but just asking Jesus, like, okay, is this something I'm supposed to be fighting against and overcoming, or is this something you want me to embrace, to surrender to what you're doing here? Like, what season am I in? Is this an inward season or an outward season? If it's an outward season, I would lean towards this. Okay, this is time to fight, time to overcome, all those kinds of things. If it's an inward season in your life where he's doing heart development, I would venture to guess that it's time to surrender and just embrace what he's doing. Now, that's probably not 100% accurate every time, but that's where I would lean. But I think that's why, again, I think coaching is so important. It's important to have an objective perspective in your life. Important to have somebody you can ask these questions to Jesus with. So, yeah. Anyone else? How did you meet God in the valley, and what did he do for you in the valley?
Jason, I don't know whether this is relevant, but I think in response to your last question, I think I fight for others and surrender for myself. I've found it very helpful. Submit yourself to God and then resist the devil and he will flee from you. So when there's opposition against myself, or like, submitting to God is really, really important. And I feel very comfortable fighting for others. So maybe I'm off mark.
No, not necessarily. I mean, but part of fighting for others is, I mean, we want to be careful we don't assume that we know what God is doing in someone else's life. But sometimes when it's obvious that God wants to bring them to a place of surrender and embracing their circumstances and those kinds of things, I mean, that's what I'm praying for. Like, so what I'm fighting for them is that they would embrace what God is doing and not just try to escape the pain. I think we so often want to escape the pain, right? Both individually and, others. Yeah. And even as organizations, like, we want to escape the pain. And I don't think that's not a good reason to take authority over something. To simply avoid the pain or escape the pain. We need to make sure that we're in touch with what God is doing here. Is God actually using the pain or the circumstance to develop us into the organization or the individuals that we are called to be? And so that's a really important question to ask Jesus. Like, am I just trying to avoid the pain here? Or am I, or is this something that you want me to, like, gain victory over currently? A lot of it comes down to discernment, but we get that by asking Jesus. So what practices will keep my focus on, the agenda is renovating my identity. So what practices will keep my focus on that?
I'm thinking of, how you've heard the phrase, keep a short account on your sins, so to speak, right?
Mhm.
Deal with it with God. Again, keeping a short account on my heart. I'm thinking in terms of heart distresses, keeping, don't let it go on for a few days. Look to have that abiding time with the Lord to address it in a reasonable time frame.
Yeah, and I think the key in what you said there was time with the Lord. This is a time to really focus in on that. I think.
I think another aspect of that is as you spend time with the Lord and as you soak in that presence, asking the Lord specific questions about who he sees me as.
Yeah. Good.
How does he value the time we have? There's all, and one of the benefit on being on the other programs I have with you, Jason, is the questions for Jesus and how much
Yes.
you get is unbelievable.
Yeah,
It's life transforming.
I totally agree. Yeah, that's great. I know for me, this, I got to the place where I was like, man, I'll go work at McDonald's. Like, just let me do something, like, and he was just like, no, I want you to spend this time with me. This is time to spend with me. Trust me that I'm going to provide, financially. And of course, it wasn't just about finances. It was, I want to have some kind of value, quote unquote. And I say that quote unquote, like value according to what the world sees as valuable or significant or whatever. And he just said, no, I want you to spend this time with me. So a lot of this in a valley, copious amounts of time with the Lord, allowing him to process you, process your heart, recognizing how your heart is coming to the surface. How do my responses to my situation reflect who I am and who God is developing me to be? So in other words, my response was, just let me do something. I gotta go to work. I gotta do something. I'm supposed to, I'm a man, I gotta go work, like, no. So what was going on inside of me? Oh, I'm trying to pull my identity from my work or my significance from my work, or like you fill in the desire, right? I'm trying to pull that from my work. And in a valley, he's trying to separate me from getting my desires met through anything other than him. To enter into a releasing stage, or your convergence, your fulfillment stage, where everything converges for your fulfillment stage. What's required of us to enter into those stages, either the releasing stage or the fulfillment stage? What's required of us at that point to enter into those stages?
First thing that comes to me is surrender. Total
Yeah.
surrender to the will of the Lord.
Okay,
You
good.
just don't care about holding on anymore. You open your hands, let it go. Hey,
Yes,
I'm yours.
yes. And what happens as a result of that? So I think that's happening in that valley of identity. If we're talking about going into the fulfillment stage, we've totally surrendered. We've let go. What happens next to go into that fulfillment stage?
You
Yeah,
have to
Lynn
learn.
says risk.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're taking this huge risk, right? Like I had to take a huge risk to actually start doing what I'm doing right now. And I had to believe, well, one of the marking identifiers as you're going into that fulfillment stage is believing who God has called you to be, even if nobody else is saying it at the time. He wants us to be able to receive that from him. So Paul says, I'm an apostle called by Christ, not called by any man, right? So you have to get comfortable with that, with your identity, who God says you are, before anybody else confirms it or affirms it or whatever, right? I am called to coach leaders. I had to be comfortable with that before anybody else was going to confirm it. Now, once I was, and I put myself out there, hey, this is what I'm called to do. Then God sends that confirmation and affirmation and all those different things, right? But a big part of this is taking a huge risk. You're taking everything that God has done in you in your entire life, and you're saying, here it is, God. And he's saying, now I want you to go do this.
I don't know
And
if
it takes,
I don't know if you've ever experienced this, Jason, but where when you feel that call and you know that it's the Lord calling you, sometimes the people who are the closest to you, or you think are the closest to you, will sometimes question or challenge you in terms of your decisions.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and you have to be solid and nope, this is what God has spoken to me.
Yeah, because I know it certainly happened to both my wife and I. My wife was totally aligned with me with God's call on my life, but her children, my stepchildren, at some point in time looked at they looked at what we had to go through to get here,
Yeah.
and I thought they were going to get me committed. To be honest with you.
Right. Excuse me. Yeah, it's true. Any other questions about how to engage either in a stage or in a valley? There's a lot more in the books too that you have about this. Any other questions off the top of your head as far as how to engage, what the agenda is in a stage or a valley?
Yeah, I'm thinking, realizing I'm in this valley of identity for a while, and there's a lot going on as far as exposing internal things and getting truth from God at my heart level. And I guess I'm just continuing in that, but I'm also trying to put pieces together to have a functioning coaching, mentoring entity, which I haven't done all the legwork, but I don't know, that's where I'm at. There's a lot I just don't know what I should be doing and so forth.
Right.
So
Yeah, and now's not the time to figure it all out. When you're in a valley, one of the temptations is to want to figure it all out. Well, why am I here? Okay, God, let me figure all this out, basically, so I can get out of the valley and start doing again and not be in pain. We won't figure all of that out in the valley. It's important to let that go. Yeah, and embrace that I'm not going to figure it all out. Now I will say, okay, so I started coaching at the beginning of my valley of identity. And I'm just now starting to walk out of that valley. So for 6 years, I've been coaching while I'm in the valley. So a valley doesn't mean that you're doing nothing, right? It's more about the heart posture. It's more about even, okay, I'm doing this, I'm doing whatever I'm doing. But the focus is on the inward renovation of my heart. The focus is not on what I'm doing. So I don't know if that's helpful for anyone, but in other words, Jim, what prompted that is you can be coaching people and even start a coaching business and whatever.
Yeah.
That's just not going to be the focus. The focus is what God is up to in your heart, renovating your heart and your identity and all of that.
Yeah, that was very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, not everybody is going to be like not working at all, or I don't know, whatever. It'll be different for different people. But the focus is on inward renovation. Yeah, Claude, you raised your hand. Oh, you're on mute.
Yeah, I was on mute. I think what you just said, the focus is on renewing your heart.
Yeah.
As opposed to what you will actually doing per se.
Exactly.
It's easy to lose track of that sometimes.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Sometimes you try to find meaningfulness in terms of the things you do, even though they may not all necessarily be kingdom related, but at some level, if they somewhat touches it. And sometimes you try so darn hard to create these connections where they're not normal or natural connections because they're not God-given connections. They're more like things you do on your own to try to some extent, justify what you're doing.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. It's good. All right, well, let's take our last break here. We'll come back at 5 after, and then we're going to wrap up the day. Okay. See you in 5 minutes. All right, if everybody can start coming back, we're gonna wrap up our day here with one last session. Okay, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna do some exercises here to get real practical. We want to engage God's agenda and make the most out of this, okay? Whoops, I need to share my screen. So we're gonna be creating an action plan. If you don't make a plan to follow through on what you've learned today, the minute you walk out the door, the chance of you doing anything about it drops in half. Anybody who's done sales probably realizes this. As soon as they walk out the door, your chances of making a sale drop to about 10% kind of thing. So it's important that we do something while we're together here today. So we want to identify, what is God doing in us? So here's, what is God doing in you? Excuse me. Examine the stage characteristics for your current season. Which ones are you experiencing? So again, this is on pages 184, 85, and 186. Jot down some key insights about what God is doing in your life in this season, and then choose 2 practical steps you can commit to lean into God's growth agenda for you. Okay. So I'm going to give you about 12 minutes to do these 3 things that you guys can all see these on the screen. Is that correct? Okay, good. I'm going to give you about 12 minutes to do that. Okay. Any questions before you do?
This is, you're saying alone, we're gonna be alone.
Yeah, yeah, just on your own. That's right. All right, I'm going to be right here. Just about 1 minute left here. Okay. Now we're going to transition to breakout rooms again. And here's what I want you to do. And you might want to take a screenshot of this if you want to be able to see these steps while you're in your groups here. So each of you, if you're in a group of 3, you're each going to have 5 minutes. If you're in a group of 2, you'll have 7.5 minutes each. So briefly share your current season and what you feel God is doing in it. Then talk about how are you engaging his agenda well, and what is a challenge for you? And what steps are you committing to? And then make a concrete plan together to check in with each other to provide support and accountability going forward. So exchange emails or phone numbers, however you want to communicate with one another. But make an accountability plan. If you just say, oh, I'll call you, at some point down the road, if it'll never happen, right? Make a specific plan of how you can support and keep each other accountable. Okay. Any questions on this? Go ahead and get a screenshot if you want, because I'm going to stop sharing here so I can put you in the breakout rooms. Okay. Okay, it looks like, so you guys will each have 7.5 minutes. I'm going to put you in. Oh, actually, let me see something. Create. Okay, so there will be 1 group of 3 and 2 groups of 2. All right, and I'll keep time for you. Any questions before you go to your breakout rooms? All right, off you go.
Jason, what's the total time we'll have in the breakout room?
15 minutes total.
15. Okay, thank you.
Jeremy, are you there?